In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west and stumbled upon the Americas, beginning an era of European exploration and colonization that reshaped the world. But 70 years earlier, Chinese Admiral Zheng He commanded massive treasure fleets that dwarfed anything Europe could build. Ships with 9 masts carrying thousands of sailors across the Indian Ocean. What if those fleets had continued sailing? What if Chinese explorers had reached Europe before Europeans reached Asia? Today, we're exploring an alternate timeline where China discovered Europe first. Between 1405 and 1433, the Ming Dynasty launched 7 incredible maritime expeditions. Admiral Zheng He commanded fleets of over 300 ships, some vessels measuring 400 feet long, 5 times larger than Columbus's ships. These treasure fleets reached East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and Southeast Asia, establishing Chinese influence and collecting tribute. Then suddenly, it all stopped. In 1433, the Confucian bureaucrats in the Chinese court convinced the emperor to end the voyages. They argued that maritime expeditions were wasteful, that China was the center of civilization and didn't need to explore barbarian lands. The treasure ships were left to rot. China turned inward just as Europe was preparing to turn outward. But what if the Chinese court had made a different decision? What if the voyages had continued? What if Chinese ships had rounded Africa and reached Europe? Let's explore this fascinating alternate reality. In this timeline, Emperor Xuande listens to different advisors in 1435. Instead of ending the treasure voyages, he authorizes an 8th expedition with an even more ambitious goal, to reach the western edge of the world. Admiral Zheng He has died, but his protege leads the new expedition. By 1440, Chinese ships have explored the entire African coast, establishing trading posts and tributary relationships. The massive Chinese vessels, with their superior navigational technology and magnetic compasses, make the journey that Portuguese explorers would attempt decades later in our timeline. In 1442, Chinese ships enter the Mediterranean. Imagine the shock in Venice, Genoa, and Constantinople when massive Chinese treasure ships, larger than anything Europeans have ever seen, sail into their harbors. Chinese sailors, wearing silk and carrying porcelain, present letters from the Ming Emperor demanding tribute and trade. European powers are overwhelmed. They've never seen ships of such size or sophistication. Chinese navigation, printing, gunpowder weapons, and maritime technology are decades ahead of European equivalents. The psychological impact is enormous. Europeans realize they are not the most advanced civilization, not even close. Chinese merchants establish trading factories in Mediterranean ports. They're interested in European wool, metals, and some manufactured goods. But mostly they view Europe as a source of raw materials and curiosities. The Chinese see Europeans the way Europeans would view Africans and Asians in our timeline, interesting but inferior. The economic implications are staggering. Chinese silk, porcelain, tea, and spices flood European markets, but now at Chinese-controlled prices. European merchants become middlemen in a trade system dominated by Chinese interests. Wealth flows eastward rather than westward. The Ming Dynasty, enriched by global trade, experiences an economic golden age. The treasure voyages prove profitable, encouraging further exploration. By 1460, Chinese ships have reached the Americas. 50 years before Columbus, they established trading posts in Central America, exchanging Chinese goods for silver, gold, and exotic American products. Before we continue this journey through alternate history, if you're finding this fascinating, how do you think Europe would react to Chinese dominance? Let's keep going. Native American civilizations encounter China first, not Europe. The Aztecs and Incas meet Chinese traders who are interested in commerce and tribute, not conquest and conversion. Chinese policy toward foreign peoples is to establish tributary relationships while largely leaving local governance intact. This means no Aztec or Inca genocide. Native populations aren't devastated by European diseases because contact happens more gradually through trade rather than invasion. Chinese diseases affect American populations, but Chinese traders aren't bringing smallpox and measles at the same catastrophic rates. By 1500, a global trading network exists with China at its center. Chinese becomes the lingua franca of international trade. European nations compete desperately to attract Chinese traders, offering favorable terms and concessions. The Renaissance still happens. Classical knowledge rediscovered from Byzantine and Islamic sources, but it's influenced by Chinese ideas arriving through trade. European artists experiment with Chinese landscape painting techniques. Philosophers study Chinese texts on governance and ethics. Gunpowder weapons advance as Europeans try to match Chinese military technology. The Protestant Reformation might unfold differently, with European Christianity feeling less triumphant, not conquering the world, but being secondary to Chinese Buddhist and Confucian influence. Religious debates take different forms. Europe isn't spreading Christianity globally, it's defending Christian civilization against cultural influence from the more successful East. European colonial empires never form as we know them. Spain doesn't conquer the Americas. China has already established presence there. Portugal doesn't dominate the Indian Ocean spice trade. Chinese fleets control those waters. Britain doesn't build a global empire because the seas are dominated by Chinese naval power. Instead, European nations develop as regional powers competing for Chinese favor. They modernize their militaries and economies, trying to match Chinese capabilities. But they're always playing catch-up. The dynamic is reversed. Europe struggles to resist Chinese economic and cultural dominance. The Industrial Revolution is the great reversal point. It still emerges in Britain around 1750–1800, driven by coal, steam power, and mechanical innovation. But now Britain and other European nations industrialize partly as a defensive response to Chinese economic power. They must industrialize to compete. Chinese observers initially dismiss European industrial developments as barbarian tinkering, just as Chinese scholars dismiss the treasure voyages. This is China's critical mistake. While Chinese merchants enjoy their global trade network, European nations frantically industrialize to escape economic subordination. By 1850, the balance shifts. European industrial power surpasses Chinese manufacturing. Steel mills, railroads, and modern weapons give Europe technological advantages. The global order begins reversing. Industrial Europe challenges commercial China. However, China in this timeline has been globally engaged for 400 years. They're not isolated and unprepared, as in our timeline. Chinese reformers, seeing European industrial advances, push for modernization. The Opium Wars don't happen because China is stronger and more connected to global politics. Fast forward to 2025 in this alternate timeline. What does the world look like? Chinese culture dominates globally far more than in our reality. Mandarin is the universal second language. Chinese cultural exports, philosophy, art, cuisine, are even more influential worldwide. Europe and the Americas developed later and differently, always in response to Chinese influence. Democracy might emerge, but mixed with Confucian concepts of meritocratic bureaucracy. The concept of individual rights competes, with Chinese emphasis on social harmony and collective responsibility. Technology is probably similar. Industrial and digital revolutions still happen, but innovation is more distributed between China and the West. Silicon Valley has a rival in Chinese tech centers that have been globally connected for centuries. Native American civilizations survived and adapted, maintaining much larger populations and stronger cultural identities. They're integrated into global trade networks while preserving more autonomy than in our timeline. Africa develops differently too, with Chinese rather than European colonial powers establishing coastal trading posts. African kingdoms negotiate from slightly stronger positions. The slave trade still exists. Chinese, Arab, and European merchants all participate, but perhaps not at the same devastating scale as the Atlantic slave trade. The environmental situation might be worse. 6 centuries of intensive global trade and earlier industrialization in China means more resource depletion and pollution. Climate change could be even more advanced. Would this world be better or worse? It's genuinely complex. European colonialism's worst excesses, genocide, slavery, cultural destruction, are reduced. Native populations survive in far greater numbers, but Chinese hegemony brings its own forms of dominance and exploitation. The fundamental power dynamics are reversed, not eliminated. Instead of European empires carving up the world, Chinese trade networks dominate. One form of imperialism replaces another, though perhaps with different characteristics, more economic than territorial, more cultural than military. What's fascinating is how contingent history really is. A single decision by a Chinese emperor in 1433 determined that Europe would explore and dominate the world. A different decision could have created a world where Chinese junks arrived in Venice before European caravels reached India. The implications remind us that Western dominance wasn't inevitable. It resulted from specific historical circumstances, not inherent superiority. In an alternate timeline with different choices, the power dynamics could have flipped entirely. What do you think? Would a Chinese-dominated world be fundamentally different from our European-dominated one? Or would imperialism look similar, regardless of who's in charge? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this alternate history, check out our video on What If the Aztec Empire Survived? Link in the description. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating what ifs, and I'll see you in the next video.